Hi, my name is Grayson Mitchell. This is my video interview for Philosophical Orientation to Education for my final assignment. Tonight I'm going to be interviewing Miss Catherine Baber. She has been teaching for 16 years. She teaches secondary education. She has art and family studies as teachables.
Hi.
Hi.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay. Do you want to tell me a little bit about your career at all? Brief.
So I was fortunate to start right into teaching full time. I never supplied anywhere. And I actually had the opportunity of working at a school that focused a lot on special education and re-engagement of students for my first 6 years. And I think that I was so fortunate to start with that experience because it was a small school, a small population, and everybody loved what they were doing. They were so passionately committed. So, and there was a lot of freedom because you had to engage the students and really find a way to connect with them. So they, from administration, there was a lot of trust. So it really kind of set the tone, I think, for me to, excuse me, you need to go lay down now.
Sorry,
Thank you.
dogs.
It just started as a great experience, and then for the last 10 years now, I've been at a large school. We have 1,200 students, which is a large difference from 200 students, and I love that as well. I've been there for 10 years now.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So it's safe for me to make the assumption that you enjoy teaching. You like
I love it. Absolutely love it.
teacher.
Yeah, I didn't always love it, but I really love it now.
My first question is, what is the function of education?
Ooh.
Pretty broad.
What do I believe the function of education is?
This is everything is your personal opinion here in this interview.
I feel like my belief is going to align a lot with my philosophy of education, but I believe the function of education is to teach self-confidence in students and to teach them to wonder, to teach them to question and be curious. There is information everywhere for them. It's at their fingertips in their whole life. And I believe people should be lifelong learners. So if we can inspire them to know that they have the power to go out there and find answers and how good it feels to learn something, then that would be ideal. That would be the dream.
That's a fantastic response. I'm in complete agreement with you about the lifetime learning. I myself am more than just a career. I feel like a career student, even though I am.
Sure. How awesome.
Okay, now this is contextual, I guess. The next part of this is still the same question, but why the institution of school? This is interrelated to the first question of
I think that a lot of
what is the
times
function of education.
I have kids that come into my class, so I'm really fortunate to teach art and family studies, which are personal subjects, and we can teach anything, and it makes it easier to connect to students, but it's also very exposing, so I have to spend a lot of time making everybody feel comfortable and appreciate the unique qualities and differences of everybody, which means we get really close. But when a lot of those kids first come in there, there's a wall, there's resistance, and there's a sense of comparison.
Well, I have this feeling that the educational context is associated for a lot of students as they have a negative bias towards it, right? From whatever it is, poor experiences in school, or just general stigmatization of school being not fun or not enjoyable for young students.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of students that wouldn't have chosen to engage in my subject area, or wouldn't have chosen to interact with the kids that they start to develop great relationships with, or even at least appreciation for. So I think that without school, where students have to attend, a lot of people wouldn't get through that little bit of uncomfortableness. They would stay in their comfort zone and they might not challenge themselves and keep learning.
Fantastic response again. Great. Okay, next question. This is a good one. Who should have the decision to determine what is taught?
I know I've had the opportunity to write curriculum a couple times in Ontario where you would go to Toronto. It never worked out for me timing wise, but I have seen that come up a lot where people have gone and contributed to the curriculum. And I think that's fantastic when it is people in the classroom with the kids doing that
Absolutely.
instead of, people that are removed from the situation. I'm sure there's elements of both, which is probably good too, to challenge you to explain why you think something should be included, or to help the teachers see things in new perspectives too. That's probably fantastic. So it does really come down to the teachers creating it, but then there's another element of each teacher interpreting it through the lens of the students they have in front of them. So there should be some freedom for the teachers teaching the curriculum to choose what they're going to focus on. And my experience has been that at the two schools I've been at, but there has to be a connection between all the people in that department to make sure that the experience is similar for the students.
Right, so that different groups of students aren't getting a better or worse
Right.
experience in the
different.
classroom, or different,
Yeah.
or less valid outside of the classroom.
Right.
Okay, I had a thought there.
Excuse me.
So you think there should be diversity in the people who develop the curriculum, or what is taught, right? Like,
Absolutely, but it should definitely include teachers that are currently classroom
I
teachers.
agree with you.
It should be the main body.
Great point, because ultimately it's the teachers who have to deliver the curriculum, so their involvement would make it more natural for the development of the content, right?
Yep. Maybe parents, but
No, let's keep them out of this.
I don't know. They might have some good feedback.
Unless the parents are teachers or academics. Okay, there's another part to that question. Who should have the decision to determine what it means to achieve? This is sort of a three-part question, so we'll go through this.
Yeah, again, I try to have a lot of conversations with my students to put the ownership on them. I tell them, I'm very transparent, and I think that everybody is in teaching now, or a lot of people. Here's what I need to teach you, here's why I think it's valid. At this point in your life, you may not see a connection, but in these life scenarios, it may be valid to you. So I first try to make sure they understand what they have to learn and try and get them to commit to wanting to. But then as we go through the process, there's a lot of dialogue in, again, the subject area that I'm teaching. A lot of assessment would be subjective in art, creative, self-expression courses. So I do have to have a relationship between student self-assessment and teacher-led assessment. But outside of the classroom, that's a tough one, because there are teachers that might not teach what they're supposed to and just be like, yeah, I did it. So there should be accountability, but it should ultimately rest on the shoulders of the teachers and the students.
Right, I get that that's a huge portion of this academic system, or the educational system that we have, is that we do, as teachers, have to be accountable for what they're doing in the classroom.
And I like that.
That's
I have
great,
my assessment next year. Every 5 years we have one, and I look forward to it, because then I really think, what are the greatest elements that make the students shine that I want to show here and showcase my class and the ability of the kids. So I look forward to those assessments.
So you think that the priority should be that students and teachers, there should be a joint effort on determining some level of success, or what achievement is in the classroom for a student?
I think so.
It's a good part for them to learn that as individuals, what achieving means for them.
Yeah.
While maintaining some type of outside observation that keeps people accountable for what
At least
goes on.
accountability.
Right.
Yes.
within the education system.
Yes.
Okay. This is great. I'm learning a lot from this interview. There's a couple other questions. I don't know. We can probably breeze through those. It was when and how, or who has the right to learn, when and how, right?
Everybody has the right to learn.
Everyone does. I agree with you there.
Always.
Equity
and how it works for them.
Yeah, especially, the Ontario Ministry of Education, it's a big part of their philosophy for education, right, is equity. And I think that's should be important globally, and we're getting there. It's just education available is a huge issue on a greater scale, right? When and how? I mean, from 8:30 to 2:30 every day, right? That's sort of-
When? I was really interested when I first finished Teachers College to go to a school, it was a private school in England, where the students chose what they wanted to learn and when they wanted to learn. And obviously, money was not an issue because students would go and sometimes for a whole year would be like, I don't like school, I don't want to do anything. And then eventually there would be something they wanted to learn and it would be student led. And I think that like those people probably have done some fantastic things in their life. It might be more
That's
along the lines of
existentialism.
Montessori
Right.
learning, and maybe they don't have exposure to things they would have liked. You know, maybe they're missing out too in some areas, but when somebody chooses to engage in something, they're going to get a lot more out of it.
Absolutely, and that's a huge part of my own teaching philosophy. But that is essentially, it's existentialism as a philosophy for education, right? It's very student-led, individual choosing their path, choosing their content, choosing the who, what, when, why, where, how of how they're going to get an education. I think that would be fantastic. I don't know that our society
I was just
is
gonna
at that point.
In practice, and in practice, managing that in a classroom
Ideal
is
yes.
impossible.
Yeah. Oh.
But
I can imagine.
as long as you have as much diversity as you can, and I even reminded my students again today, like if I give you an assignment and you're not feeling it, present me another idea and we'll have a conversation. Here's the skills that I want to see and here's why I think those skills are valuable. So if you want to tweak them and change them a bit, go for it. But like, here's what I need. So can you show me what I need to see and do what you're interested
Your
in?
own creativity.
Yes,
That's great.
absolutely.
It's a fantastic modality you have there. Okay, this is one that I believe firmly in. This question, next question. Should socialization be part of an education?
Yes and no. Obviously, because I teach family studies, it is a part of it. And again, because I teach art and it's creative and it's very self-exposing, it has to be part of it. But if it was included as having to be part of education, we would be having to assess that, and hopefully teachers are just compassionate people that really love their job and are in control of their own emotions and have really good self-understanding, that they can role model socialization skills and express the importance without it having to be part of the curriculum. For example, like communication isn't part of the curriculum. Potentially there's visual communication in art, and I have some communication in family studies, but you know, technically I can't assess their ability to write or their spelling, but I do tell them that this is valuable and here's why it's good to want to express yourself, so I can, you know, foster the desire to be good at it, but I'm not measuring it. So I don't know that I want it in there, so I have to measure it. And in a sense, we
So-
are measuring it because we do have our 6 learning skills that we measure all the time.
Yep.
But
So if I'm just to take it down to the brass tacks of what you're saying here, the socialization that these kids are learning, for example, we're taking secondary school because this is what I'm going to use for an example, because this is what I'm going to be teaching after my education is complete here. So the socialization that they are learning, because they are absolutely learning how to operate in social situations
Yeah.
during their education, the period of their education in high school. It's a necessary part for them, obviously, as a stepping stone into integrating into society after school and being children. Like once they become adults, it's a very important part that they learn these skills, how to interact, how to have manners and etiquette on some level, how to not offend people, just have basic communication skills, as long as we're not assessing that. But in a way, I feel like through behaviorism and stuff that still exists in our schools, we are assessing it on some level. Because if we're punishing them, if we're handing out punishments for them not following the rules, then, I mean, it's sort of a form of evaluation, right?
Yep. And if a
And we're
student,
reporting on it.
yeah.
Right.
Well, we are, and we're reporting on learning skills. So do you think then it should be included in everybody's curriculum how to teach that? Because there are a lot of people that are educators that might not know how to do that.
Well, I don't know. Again, I mean, I don't have all the answers. I'm just a student. But what do I think? I think they're going to naturally evolve in a social environment on their own, and that's why you see different levels of that in the classroom, right? You see some kids who evolve on that level. They have strengths in their social interactions, or you see some kids. I mean, it depends on the influences in their life too, like
Right.
what influences their parents. Some kids might have stricter parents who enforce etiquette and good social behavior in their kids, or have expectations of them, right?
Well, then you have the opportunity of teams and clubs.
Absolutely.
And then you have community service hours, but there's some classes that are mandatory, of course, and careers and civics is one that's mandatory. And the other one that I think should be mandatory is my grade 12 personal life management, which is kind of an extension of
that class.
civics and careers. But it is really teaching everybody to understand themselves, understand others, and then how to get along and how to be successful at life. So incorporating something like that, maybe as a mandatory course, or one family studies course as a mandatory course potentially, and then and making them be part of a team or a club would teach those skills too. In a
This
school
comes up,
environment.
it actually comes up amongst my peers a lot, and there are discussions that we have. We have a lot of discussion posts that go on online when we're analyzing various philosophical or educational philosophies. A lot of progressive students nowadays think that a well-being and mental health check-ins should be a part of every class, regardless of what the subject is, like it's an important thing to reinforce on a daily basis for students, right? They will
Yeah,
get this
and I
level
just
of
think it's just
check-ins.
not everybody's personality.
You mean from a teacher's point of view or from a
yeah.
student's point of view? Right.
Teacher's point of view.
Someone would think
Someone has a
that's-
lot of content in math and they're just going through,
they're not
and
gonna stop
they
asking
should
if
still be
they're
a
okay.
respectful person and notice if somebody's not okay and not center them out. But not everybody has those skills, and maybe it should be something in teacher education that should be taught first,
That's right.
is how to learn to manage your own emotions so you're not reactive to students, and how to handle classroom management rather than calling a student out on something who might be having a hard moment,
Absolutely.
misbehaving, pulling them into a hallway, which isn't always possible with 30 students in the middle of a situation. But you really have to have good accountability of self-management as a teacher, I think, and maybe we need to enforce that in some teachers
Right.
to filter them out as
Just-
part of an assessment.
Gauging their ability to teach based on their own academic level
Yeah,
of
terrible.
understanding.
Yes, because
Like you have like some weird math nerd who wasn't very social, didn't know how to interact with anyone.
Gets
but
the
he's in
curriculum.
there because he really understands
yes,
what
or she.
a, or
Yes.
he or
Yes.
she really understands
Mhm.
concepts there.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great, fantastic interview.
Oh, is it?
Great. No.
Oh.
I'm moving on to the next question. I was just giving you some praise here because we're really getting a lot of great feedback. We're on to question 4. We got. We're supposed to cover 5. I'll check the time. We're only 16 minutes, and I'd like to keep this under 20. So maybe we might have to just try and rush it through the next 2. Okay.
I can be
Question
a quick
4.
talker.
Has education really changed over the last century?
Yes.
I
Yes. I think a lot.
I agree.
Student voice is a big focus this year, and I think 100 years ago, student voice was non-existent and probably silenced. So that is a big change. Whether it's really being heard yet, I'm not sure. But I can even say we had some positive changes in silly things like the dress code, and the students, shared their opinion and what they felt might be good solutions. And there was changes made, and I thought that was pretty progressive. So that's outside of the classroom situation, but again, all those clubs are run by teachers and administration. So I think that students' voices are being heard. That's a big change for me. Obviously, there are some negative changes where a lot of education can be teacher-led or really teacher motivated and the accountability isn't really there for the student, like they could coast through. So getting rid of some of the accountability and pressure on the students has really allowed them to be lazier. Even having the end of a semester for your final deadline for everything, for me, that wouldn't work. I would only hand something in when I really have a deadline, and that's when I can force myself to focus on it. So some of those things should be maybe options, but not always available. And I think it's up to the individual teacher what they do, but technically you can hand everything in on the very last day and it needs to all be accepted without late marks. So some of those things aren't.
So you think that the lack of deadlines and like strict adherence to these deadlines and due dates is compromising the integrity of the classroom in our modern
I think it should not be
education
like,
system?
it should exist maybe as an option, but not as a guarantee. Like maybe you need to present a case. You know, you need to say, this is going on right now, or, you know what, I'm not into it. And then at the end, you know what, I don't know why I wasted that. This was really cool and I wished I'd learned this. Like needs to be some accountability.
And that could be
on the
great,
student.
also a great tool for teaching, a teachable moment for students to communicate and advocate for themselves.
Yeah,
If you want
yeah.
to hand it in late, sure, hand it in late, but talk to me about it.
Yeah,
Tell me why you need to hand it in late.
and how are you gonna do it differently next
that's
time?
teaching, great, yeah, and teaching them later in life how to assert themselves when
Yeah.
they need assistance
Perfect.
or need help or reach out, right?
Yeah, yep. And that is a big difference. I think students feel that teachers are maybe more approachable and they can say things to them. And I think every pendulum swings. So it's possible that, 100 years ago, you didn't say anything to the teacher. Your opinion didn't matter. And now maybe the student voice in some scenarios like that matters too much, but it will come to a middle ground where,
Some level of balance.
Yeah,
It's
I
maybe
think
just
so.
a little extreme in
Yeah.
that whole pendulum effect.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next. That was another great response, thanks. This one, I don't know what we're gonna get out of this or if we're gonna get through it. It's sort of a pensive question, like you might not be able to have an answer right off the hop. Okay. Question is, it's sort of a multi-part here. What is an educated person, a learned person? Are they different? What does it mean to know? So you got a few things coming at you there.
I think that an educated person is different than a learned person. They might have information stored in their brain, but to me it's a less accessible or open, like a learned or learned, I guess, person is more in that cycle of learning continually, and seems to me like they might be more open, and I'm making complete assumptions, but they might be more open to information as it comes in, and it might be more fluid. And an educated person to me seems a lot more rigid in their knowledge, and they think that it is this way, and
Theoretical.
yeah, maybe less open.
So this was, the way I interpreted it was, educated person seems academic, right? You've learned a lot of things in theory, you've read a lot of textbooks, done a lot of assignments, had a lot of experience in the educational system, whereas a learned person seems more like life experience or personal research, like a learned person, a scholar, someone who takes it upon themselves to study, you know?
Yeah,
This is just sort of-
self-motivated.
Right, a
Yes.
self-motivated learner.
Yep. I mean, they could be a scholar
They can
or
still
an
be
educated.
educated. right?
Yes, yes, but they are to me more open, and it's an evolving process instead of kind of like a concrete endpoint. I guess it's like a closed mindset and a growth mindset. I picture an educated person to have more of a closed mindset. I am good at math. I am good at etc. Versus an open,
Arrogance in that sense. I'm educated.
versus an open-minded person would be more like, I put in a lot of time on this project and I have had success from the commitment I made to it. So, I have learned a lot about this because I have approached it from all these areas of experience, but I still have more to learn. And then what does it mean to know?
To know. It's a deep question.
What it means to know is an experience of a feeling in a person, and if you don't have the skills to communicate it, you can't share it. It doesn't mean you can't know it, it just means you can't share it. That's what I think.
It's very deep. It's very profound response.
Thank you.
No. I agree with you. What does it mean to know? There's a lot of things that I know that I think I would have a hard time articulating if I tried unless I really worked at it, right?
And it is a self-experience. It's a feeling and a thought all simultaneously, and sometimes you can't get all the elements out to actually express it.
Very tacit. Okay, well that concludes the interview. There was one other question here, but we're running at like 23 minutes now, and I'm not sure the professor is going to be able to make it through with having 30 students or whatever it is she goes to class. So thank you very much. It was very enlightening. I think you did a fantastic job. Not knowing the content of the questions before you came into this, so I really appreciate your time, and so thank you again.
Thank you.
Good evening, and welcome to my personal philosophy for education reflection, my final assignment for philosophical orientation to education. I chose to do a video reflection because, for a couple of reasons, I thought it would be a great experience for me, a good learning experience, and I thought maybe, hopefully, it would be natural to the process of getting my philosophy out there. I've written a lot of papers throughout my academic career, and I thought this would be a different format and could be really beneficial for me. So, above all, I consider myself a student. I'm passionate about education. I believe in it, which is why I chose to study education and to ultimately, hopefully, become a teacher afterwards. I have strong beliefs as far as my philosophy goes in for teaching. My teaching philosophy, I had a lot of ideas about what I felt good teaching was and good education was previous to me being accepted in the program at the University of Windsor. A lot of my feelings on the subject were ideas that I had a hard time articulating, though, because I hadn't studied educational philosophy, educational psychology, or any philosophy of education really up to that point, though I considered myself a student and held learning in high importance for my entire life. Basically, 3 years ago, I decided to go back to college, and I studied civil engineering, which was related to my field. My career was in construction technology. I worked in construction for 20 years and operated a business, my own business, for 13 of those, which was a learning process for me for decades. It was always about learning and evolving, really. I was learning about the practice of business, learning new skills and techniques. And I came to be a very hands-on learner over the years. Observation was a big thing for me. I learned a lot just by being in my environment and observing what was going on, interacting with peers, colleagues in my environment, on the job site, whether it be the job site or any context that I was discussing business or construction with any of my fellow contractors or developers, customers. But it wasn't really until I returned to college that I really became immersed in education and developed a respect for the process of education. I always read a lot, and I always had personal studies and did research on topics that interested me. But college for me was sort of a very focused form of education. So a few of the things that I've learned about myself in college was with regard to my motivation for learning, my motivation for study. I found a lot in college that when I was excelling in a subject, a particular subject or class, something that I was engaged in, I was really aware of it and I felt great about it. And when I was struggling with things, I was even more aware of it. Like, it was devastating to me sometimes, or trying to push myself through work that I didn't find engaging was just terrible. So I started to have reflections about what it was that made me motivated as a student, or why some of the experiences in college were so enjoyable. Some of the courses were so great, and some of them were like just, I could barely bring myself to do them, even though I think of myself as an intellectual and I have the highest respect for knowledge and education. And then when I got to university, I started to actually study some philosophies on education, and some of the work of some classic educational psychologists, which was very enlightening to me, because there were systems for learning and thinking that I was previously aware of, but I could never really explain, or I could never put it to a theory that I could write down on paper, or try to teach to someone else, or really reflect on, in a sense, until some of these ideals and theories and philosophies were put into words by, I identified with Vygotsky and Piaget and some of Bandura's work when I was developing my teaching philosophy previous to this course that I'm enrolled in now. I did like when I first learned about multiple intelligences and Gardner's theories with regard to those, because it helped explain to me, or helped me to have an understanding of some of the ways that I behaved in the educational context, and even some of the ways that I found myself being engaged or not engaged in my career, and through the courses that I took in college. So when I first developed my actual teaching philosophy, when I first wrote it in a paper, I focused it on intrinsic motivation. So the motivation of the student, and how to make a student motivated, and how I was going to incorporate that into my teaching and into my practice once I became a teacher. I used that as almost the defining theory for my teaching philosophy, though I had incorporated some other elements to it also. Ultimately, my goal was to cultivate my students' intrinsic motivation, so that they sort of became their own teachers in that sense, which during this course I really related to existentialism and the philosophy of that as a teaching practice, or as an educational philosophy. The fact that we are all individuals with our own free will, though our free will is influenced by our environment and by factors in our life, such as our peers and the opinion of our parents growing up, and our own personal virtues and morals, of course, but ultimately we make our own choices and we guide our own paths through life, and that is a big part of our motivation as students and as teachers. So I guess where that's leading me is, in my academic career, I found that some teachers were very successful at motivating me, and others were less successful. So a lot of that was dependent upon their teaching style. I also related this to, from a point of view of observing my peers in the classroom, or in any interaction or collaboration that was going on. I noticed that some of them had a disregard for school or for class that I feel like was my own personal philosophy that I developed, or maybe it's been made aware by a psychologist before, but I never come across it. But I sort of developed this belief that students sort of developed this stigma revolving around the classroom environment and the whole context of teacher-pupil relationship, where previous experiences in their educational career that were potentially negative or potentially uncomfortable, causing them discomfort, sort of left a resonating feeling in them, so that they were associating any teacher or any type of learning or classroom environment was going back to these bad experiences that they had, which ideally for me, through my teaching practice, I hope that I can reverse this type of paradigm that they've developed through encouraging their own motivation and through creating new interpretations of the classroom environment and of learning experiences. I am going to associate my theory on the negative bias that students develop for the classroom. I'm going to relate it, though I developed it previous to studying Piaget's constructivism. It can be associated to that in the same way that Piaget argues that people or students produce a sort of internal knowledge and form their understanding and their meaning based upon their experiences. So this relates to my theory about their understanding of the classroom context having a negative association with it. Another component of his constructivism is his assimilation. So the new experiences, in hopefully through my teaching practice, being assimilated into their existing knowledge and sort of overruling the previous understanding of the educational context that they have through the negative experiences. Ideally, then, they could develop a new outlook on their learning process and be able to take away from the classroom what it is that I'm trying to deliver as far as content and curriculum goes. Another aspect of my philosophy for education is the social interaction component, which I feel is crucial and inherent in all of us, this need for collaboration and interaction with our peers. And I feel that human beings, students, young children, as well as adults, are social animals, right? Historically, we've always lived in groups, tribes, cultures, whatever you want to call it, communities. And this interdependence amongst human beings is one of the shaping factors of who we are and how we learn too, which relates to Vygotsky's theory of social constructivism. He emphasizes the importance of that social element to the development of students' cognitive function. And I will encourage this in my classroom. I encourage collaboration. It's very important, and interaction amongst the students. I feel that students aren't meant to be isolated the way that a lot of this distance education that we do nowadays, this asynchronous, it's not really our natural learning environment, or not how it's supposed to happen, but it can be convenient in many ways. So I feel even that students who already have a healthy level of this intrinsic motivation that I talk about could benefit still from the social interaction and engaging with their peers. It's good for them to know, to see another's point of view, to be able to contrast that to their own, and to use that as a stepping stone to learn further knowledge, enlighten themselves, and pursue their education. Moving forwards, continuing with some of my philosophy that's relative to Vygotsky's instruction, or Vygotsky's theories, would be his zone of proximal development. I feel it is very important to gauge the level of content that is attainable for a student to learn and is not content that is blatant review for a student. And this is key to keeping students engaged from my point of view, and it's also essential for them to maintain their motivation to learn, because content that is just out of their reach or incomprehensible for them is really defeating in the idea that they would struggle with it and not be interested in learning the content. So I got a lot of influence from him studying his theories and philosophies. Another recent development in my schooling has been my placement, which started about 3 weeks ago. And previous to that, I was very committed and dedicated to my teaching philosophy, and I had an idealistic outlook on what it would be like to be in the classroom. And the reality of actually being there has really sort of slowed my implementation of my teaching philosophy. From the point of view of the textbook version of my philosophy, everything seems in theory like it's just brilliant to me, and like I was just gonna go out there and start changing the world. But the reality of what you deal with in the classroom is a whole lot. Like there's a lot of fundamentals that occupy most of your time in a day, so it's hard for me personally to be able to even try to use some of these theories that I've developed. But the importance of some of the values that we studied in professionalism and well-being during the duration of this course, they really sort of stood out to me once I actually got into the classroom. Just the necessity for some of these ideals, like mutual respect and professionalism. It's just so essential that we maintain integrity in the classroom for everyone's sake, for the students, the teachers, sanity in the classroom. Like it can be a zoo sometimes there. And it's important that we share these values with our students without trying to force them on them. And that being said, it's a question of how we guide them to be motivated on their own to want to behave in a respectful manner, and even recognize the professionalism and the dedication of their teacher. So these are things that are new to very fresh for me, and that I'm still dealing with at this time, and I'm gonna have to reflect on my approach and try to implement some of these theories that I've been studying. I do consider myself to be progressive, and I also have always identified with a lot of Dewey's theory of pragmatism. I've always been very a hands-on learner, and I encourage that in the classroom. I feel that discussion is a very important element in students really learning content, because it sort of brings it into a context that they can understand and a dynamic that they are more aware of than just the textbook assessment version of teaching. I also strongly advocate for this interconnectedness of learning through multiple subjects, or taking elements from different teachables and incorporating them together, so that the students are learning literacy, numeracy, in addition to vocational teachings in the classroom, all sort of rolled into one curriculum, one lesson, hopefully. I think that my philosophy will be effective with tech design students, which is my teachable, because it's conducive to a combination of hands-on activities and theoretical knowledge. And one of the beautiful things about design is it's universally applicable, which is, I've always tried to incorporate into my lesson plans and stuff, the idea that anything that is manufactured or created by human beings has elements of design incorporated in it, regardless of what it is, from furniture to cars, technology to anything like shoes, clothing. It's just everywhere, and it all really can be boiled down to some fundamental steps that can be pretty easily understood by anyone. And I think that my philosophy for motivation and progressive teaching techniques really will motivate students, help to motivate students in the design process, because it's sort of like, for me, I'm designing a learning process, and my skill set, my tools are my theoretical philosophy for teaching, and I can't credit them all to myself. I mean, I have been taught these things, and I have been passionate about learning them. So I feel that if I can sort of guide my students to follow a similar path that I did, not so much in the exact content of what they're studying or what they're learning, but if I could expedite the process on how I became so passionate about education and learning, and just get that message out to them earlier, then I think ideally I'll be a really effective teacher, and hopefully I can help some students grow and become productive members of society and independent thinkers and successful in life. I'd like to thank you for your time, and hopefully I was concise with my discussion.